The drunken stupor wrapped around Nicole like a heavy fog, dulling her senses and numbing her limbs. She fought helplessly against the man's invasive touch, her will slipping away with each desperate motion. Just as her mind surrendered to darkness, a sharp crack split the night a handbag struck the man's head with force. Standing there was May, the elderly woman Nicole had served so rudely at the bakery that very morning, before being fired. Tears welled up in Nicole's eyes as she whispered, her voice trembling, Why did you save me?" Before we continue, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of La Maison Dorée, casting golden rectangles across the polished wooden floors. The French bakery sat nestled on a quiet corner of Maple Street, its cream-colored awning fluttering gently in the autumn breeze. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of butter, vanilla, and freshly baked bread, a warm embrace that greeted every customer who stepped through the door. Nicole Wallace moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, her dark hair pulled back into a tight ponytail that swayed with each quick movement. At 23, she had worked at La Maison Dorée for nearly 2 years, and her hands knew every motion by heart. The precise angle to hold the order pad, the exact pressure needed to tear a receipt cleanly, the rhythm of calling orders to the kitchen without ever raising her voice above the necessary volume. The morning rush had begun in earnest. A line of customers stretched from the counter to the door, some checking their watches anxiously, others peering up at the chalkboard menu that hung behind Nicole's head. The board was written in elegant script, listing croissants and pain au chocolat, quiches and tartines, and a rotating selection of crepes that changed with the seasons. Nicole's fingers flew across the register keys as she processed order after order. A businessman in a gray suit wanted 2 almond croissants and a double espresso. A young mother with a toddler clinging to her leg asked for a plain butter croissant, cut into small pieces. A college student requested the daily special, fumbling with her wallet as she tried to count exact change. Nicole handled each transaction with mechanical precision, her face arranged in a professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Next, please," she called out, her voice carrying clearly over the gentle murmur of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. An elderly woman shuffled forward, moving slowly with the careful steps of someone who had learned not to trust their own balance. She wore a cream-colored cardigan over a floral dress, and her silver hair was styled in soft waves that framed a face marked by deep laugh lines and gentle wrinkles. This was Mrs. May, a regular customer whom Nicole had seen perhaps a dozen times before, though she had never bothered to learn her name. Mrs. May approached the counter and tilted her head back, squinting up at the menu board with obvious difficulty. Her lips moved silently as she tried to read the elegant script, her eyes narrowing to thin slits. After a long moment, she glanced down at Nicole with an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, dear, Mrs. May said, her voice soft and wavering slightly. "I seem to have forgotten my reading glasses at home. Could you perhaps read the menu to me? Just the crepes section, if you don't mind." Nicole felt a familiar tightness in her chest, that hot, prickly sensation that always arose when elderly customers took too long, when they fumbled with their orders, when they disrupted the smooth flow of her carefully maintained efficiency. She glanced past Mrs. May at the line of waiting customers. A man in a business suit was checking his phone with increasing frequency. A woman with a yoga mat was shifting her weight from foot to foot. The pressure of their impatience seemed to press against Nicole's shoulders like physical weight. "We have chocolate, strawberry, lemon, and apple cinnamon," Nicole recited quickly, her words clipped and rushed. "What would you like?" Mrs. May blinked, clearly trying to process the rapid-fire information. "Oh, well, let me think. That's very kind of you to—" "The line is quite long this morning," Nicole interrupted, her smile growing thinner. "If you could decide quickly, that would help everyone." A flush of embarrassment colored Mrs. May's cheeks. "Yes, of course. I'm sorry. Let me see. Chocolate sounds lovely. Or perhaps the strawberry. Do you know if the strawberries are fresh or— Chocolate it is, Nicole said decisively, already turning toward the kitchen window. She raised her voice. 1 chocolate crepe, please. Mrs. May opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Her hand fluttered uncertainly near her purse. Actually, I was hoping to ask about— That'll be $8.50, Nicole said, her fingers already moving across the register screen. The transaction appeared in glowing numbers before her. Cash or card? Behind Mrs. May, someone in the line coughed pointedly. Another customer muttered something Nicole couldn't quite hear, though the impatient tone was unmistakable. Mrs. May's shoulders seemed to curve inward, making her appear smaller, more fragile. She fumbled with her purse, her hands trembling slightly as she extracted a $10 bill and placed it on the counter. Nicole took the money, made change with swift movements, and handed back the bills and coins. Your order will be ready in 5 minutes. Please wait over there. She gestured toward the pickup area without really looking at Mrs. May, then called out in a louder voice, Next, please. Mrs. May gathered her change with fumbling fingers and moved away from the counter, her eyes cast downward. She found a spot near the wall to wait, standing quietly with her hands clasped in front of her, looking small and defeated among the bustling crowd. The next customer stepped forward, a man in his early 60s, wearing casual slacks and a burgundy sweater. He had a kind face, deeply tanned from time spent outdoors, with gray hair that was neatly combed back from his forehead. This was Wayne Bridge, though Nicole didn't recognize him. The bakery owner rarely worked the floor, preferring to manage operations from his office upstairs or to inspect the kitchen during off hours. Today, he had decided to see his establishment through a customer's eyes, to experience the atmosphere his employees created when they thought the boss wasn't watching. Wayne had been standing in line for the past 10 minutes, and he had observed the entire exchange with Mrs. May. Now, as he approached the counter, his expression was neutral, though his eyes held a sharpness that suggested he was paying very close attention to everything around him. Good morning, he said pleasantly. I'd like to ask you something before I order, if you don't mind. Nicole's professional smile returned, though a hint of wariness crept into her eyes. Of course, sir. How can I help you? I was standing behind that elderly lady, Wayne said, gesturing toward Mrs. May, who was still waiting quietly by the wall. I couldn't help but notice that she seemed to be in the middle of speaking when you placed her order. Did she actually finish telling you what she wanted? The question landed like a stone in still water. Nicole felt her spine stiffen, that defensive wall rising instantly within her chest. Who was this man to question her service? Couldn't he see how busy they were, how many people were waiting, how hard she was working to keep everything moving smoothly? I helped her decide, Nicole said, her tone growing cooler. She was having trouble making up her mind, and there's quite a line, as you can see. I was just trying to move things along efficiently. Efficiently, Wayne repeated, as if tasting the word. But she didn't actually confirm that chocolate was what she wanted, did she? I believe she was about to ask you a question. Nicole felt heat rising in her face now, that familiar anger that always flared when someone, especially an older someone, presumed to tell her how to do her job. She turned sharply toward where Mrs. May stood and raised her voice slightly, an edge of irritation cutting through her words. Excuse me, ma'am. Did you want a chocolate crepe? Is that the correct order? Mrs. May startled at being addressed so directly. Every eye in the bakery seemed to turn toward her. The elderly woman's face flushed with embarrassment, and she nodded quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, that's fine. Thank you. But her eyes told a different story. Nicole could see it, that flicker of disappointment, that sad resignation of someone who had learned not to make waves, not to cause trouble, not to take up space in a world that increasingly had no patience for slowness or uncertainty. Nicole turned back to Wayne with an expression of vindication. See? Everything's fine. Now, can I take your order, or would you like to continue holding up the line? Wayne's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew harder, colder. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried unmistakable authority. "Young lady, what you just did was not customer service. That was intimidation. You made that woman feel foolish and rushed, and then you put her on the spot in front of everyone to justify your rudeness." "I wasn't rude," Nicole shot back, her voice rising despite herself. "I was being efficient. We're busy, in case you haven't noticed. I have a responsibility to serve everyone in a timely manner, not to stand around while people can't make up their minds. You have a responsibility to treat every customer with respect and kindness," Wayne said firmly. "That lady came in here hoping for a pleasant experience, and instead you made her feel like a burden." "What's your name?" "Nicole," she said automatically, then immediately regretted it. "And I don't appreciate being lectured by customers about how to do my job. If you have a complaint, you can speak to the manager." "Oh, I intend to," Wayne said, his tone steady and measured. "I'll be calling the owner of this establishment to discuss what I witnessed here today. I'm sure he'll be very interested to hear about the way his staff treats elderly customers." Nicole felt a flicker of nervousness beneath her anger, but she pushed it down, replacing it with defiance. "Fine, you do that. I'm one of the best employees here, and I was just trying to help everyone get their food faster. If you want to complain because I'm too efficient, go right ahead." Behind her, Norman appeared, a 20-year-old waiter with a gentle face and worried eyes. He had been arranging pastries in the display case, but he had heard enough of the exchange to know that Nicole was digging herself into dangerous territory. He reached out and tugged gently on the back of her apron, his touch light as a whisper. "Nicole," he murmured, keeping his voice low. "Maybe you shouldn't argue with customers. You know the policy." Nicole whirled on him, her frustration finding a new target. "Norman, I'm handling this. Don't you have pastries to arrange?" Norman's face flushed, but he held his ground. "I'm just trying to help. You know how the owner feels about customer satisfaction. Maybe you should—" "Maybe I should what?" Nicole interrupted, her voice sharp enough to make Norman wince. "Apologize for doing my job, for keeping this place running smoothly during rush hour? Look around, Norman. We're packed. If I let every customer take their sweet time, we'd never get through the morning rush." She turned back to Wayne, her jaw set in stubborn lines. "And for your information, sir, I'm not that easy to fire. This bakery needs me. We're short-staffed as it is, and I'm one of the only people who can handle the rush without falling apart. So go ahead and complain. I'm sure management will understand that I was just trying to do my job efficiently." Wayne regarded her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "I see. Well, thank you for clarifying your position. I'll make sure to mention that in my conversation with the owner." He stepped out of line and moved toward the door, pausing only to glance once more at Mrs. May, who was now accepting her chocolate crepe from the kitchen window, her movements small and apologetic. As Wayne left, Nicole felt her heart beating hard in her chest, part anger, part anxiety, part stubborn conviction that she had been in the right. She forced herself to take a deep breath and turned to the next customer with a bright, artificial smile. "Next, please. What can I get for you today?" The rest of the rush passed in a blur of orders and transactions, but Nicole couldn't quite shake the encounter from her mind. She told herself that the man had been unreasonable, that he didn't understand the pressures of customer service, that she had done nothing wrong. But beneath that certainty, a small voice whispered doubt, a voice that sounded uncomfortably like her mother's, gentle and sad, reminding her that kindness cost nothing and efficiency wasn't everything. The afternoon had faded into evening by the time Nicole returned to her small studio apartment. The space was modest, a single room that served as bedroom, living area, and kitchen all at once, with a tiny bathroom tucked into one corner. But it was hers, paid for with her own wages, decorated with her own choices, a testament to her independence and self-sufficiency. She had lived alone since she was 19, refusing to rely on anyone, building a life that required no one's permission or approval. She dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her shoes, feeling the accumulated tension of the day settling into her shoulders like a weight. The apartment was dim, lit only by the street lamp outside her window, and she didn't bother turning on the overhead light. Instead, she moved to the small kitchenette and pulled a bottle of wine from the refrigerator, cheap white wine that she kept for evenings when the world felt too heavy to carry sober. She poured herself a glass and carried it to the narrow desk that sat against the far wall, the one piece of furniture that held her most precious possessions. There, in a simple wooden frame, sat a photograph that she looked at every night before sleep, the last family portrait they had taken together, back when such things as family still existed for her. The photograph showed 3 people smiling at the camera. Her father, tall and handsome in his police uniform, his arm around her mother's shoulders. Her mother, beautiful and gentle, with the same dark hair that Nicole had inherited. And Nicole herself at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, perched on her father's shoulders with her small hands tangled in his hair. They looked happy. They had been happy for a little while. Nicole set down her wine glass and picked up the frame, running her fingers across the glass surface as if she could somehow touch the people trapped forever in that moment of joy. Her father had died when she was 8, a car accident on a rainy November evening, the kind of senseless tragedy that obliterated entire futures in a single moment. And with his death, everything else had shattered too. She remembered her grandmother's house, dark and imposing, filled with heavy furniture and the smell of mothballs. She remembered her mother weeping, trying to explain to a confused 8-year-old why they couldn't live there anymore, why grandmother had said such terrible things, why everything had changed. Her grandmother, her father's mother, had blamed Nicole's mother for the accident, claimed she had distracted him with her constant needs, insisted that she was unfit to raise Nicole alone. The custody battle had been brief and brutal. Nicole's grandmother had money and lawyers and connections. Nicole's mother had only love, and in the eyes of the court, that hadn't been enough. Nicole had been sent to live with her grandmother, and her mother had been forbidden from seeing her, granted only supervised visits once a month, visits that her grandmother made as uncomfortable and humiliating as possible. Nicole set the photograph back on the desk, but she didn't release it yet. Her fingers traced the outline of another figure, one she had carefully cut away from the original photo years ago, her grandmother, who had stood at the edge of the frame with her stern face and disapproving eyes. Nicole had excised her from the image just as she had been excised from Nicole's heart. Her mother had died when Nicole was 12, shortly after Nicole's grandmother had finally canceled even those brief monthly visits. Depression, the doctors had said. A broken heart, Nicole knew. And her grandmother had never shown a moment of remorse, never acknowledged the cruelty of what she had done, never softened the rigid rules and cold discipline that had governed Nicole's teenage years. Nicole had left her grandmother's house the day she turned 18, taking only what she could carry in a single backpack. She had never returned, never called, never looked back, and she had promised herself that she would never again let elderly people dictate her life, would never again allow their judgment and their rules to make her feel small and powerless. Her phone buzzed on the desk, jolting her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach tighten. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was local. She considered letting it go to voicemail, but something made her answer, perhaps the wine, perhaps simple curiosity, perhaps the nagging worry that had been eating at her since that morning's confrontation. Hello? Good evening. Is this Nicole Wallace? The voice was male, professional, with a hint of warmth that didn't quite mask an underlying seriousness. Yes, this is Nicole. Who's calling? This is Wayne Bridge, the owner of La Maison Dorée. I'm sorry to call so late, but I wanted to speak with you about an incident that occurred at the bakery this morning. Nicole's hand tightened around the phone. So the complaining customer had followed through on his threat. She should have known. People like that always did self-righteous and convinced of their own moral superiority, eager to get service workers in trouble for the smallest perceived slight. I see, she said. keeping her voice carefully neutral. "What would you like to know?" "I received a call from a customer who witnessed you interacting with an elderly woman during the morning rush. He said you were impatient and dismissive, that you rushed her order without allowing her to finish speaking, and that when he questioned your behavior, you were argumentative and defensive. I'd like to hear your side of the story." Nicole took a long sip of wine, buying herself a moment to think. She could defend herself, could explain the pressures of the rush, could point out her excellent work record and her value to the bakery. But something in the owner's tone suggested that explanations would ring hollow, that he had already made up his mind about what kind of employee she was. "It was busy this morning," she said finally, trying to keep her voice even. "We had a long line of customers, and the elderly woman was taking a very long time to decide. I was trying to help her make a choice so we could serve everyone efficiently. I didn't mean to be rude. The customer said you didn't give her a chance to finish her sentence. He said you ordered for her without confirmation, and then when he pointed this out, you became defensive rather than apologizing." "I was just doing my job," Nicole said, feeling that familiar defensiveness rising in her chest. "Customer service isn't just about one person, it's about balancing everyone's needs. If I let one person take 10 minutes to decide, then 20 other people are standing there waiting and getting frustrated. I have to think about efficiency." "Efficiency is important," Wayne agreed, his tone maddeningly calm. "But so is kindness, so is patience. So is making every customer feel valued, regardless of how long they take or how busy we are. That's not just good business, it's basic human decency." Nicole bit back the sharp retort that rose to her lips. She wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways she kept the bakery running smoothly, wanted to defend her actions and her choices, but she could hear in his voice that he wasn't looking for a debate. He was looking for an apology, for contrition, for evidence that she understood what she had done wrong. And the truth was, she didn't entirely understand. She had been efficient. She had kept the line moving. She had done her job exactly as she had done it hundreds of times before. If the elderly woman had been offended, well, that was unfortunate. But Nicole couldn't cater to everyone's sensitivities when she had a business to run. Still, she needed this job. Her rent was due in 2 weeks, and her savings account held barely enough to cover 1 month's expenses. She couldn't afford to be fired over something so trivial, couldn't let her pride destroy the fragile independence she had worked so hard to build. "I'm sorry," she said, the words coming out flat and mechanical. "I didn't mean to make her feel bad. I'll try to be more patient in the future." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Nicole could almost hear him evaluating her words, weighing their sincerity, measuring the distance between what she was saying and what she actually felt. "I appreciate you saying that," Wayne said finally, though his tone suggested he heard the emptiness in her apology as clearly as she did. "I hope you understand that at La Maison Dorée, we pride ourselves on creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere for all our customers. That's not just a policy, it's the heart of who we are. Our motto is, 'Sweetness soothes the soul.' We're not just selling pastries. We're offering people a moment of comfort and joy in their day." "I understand," Nicole said, though she didn't really. It was just a bakery, just a job, just a transaction. Customers came in, they bought food, they left. Why did everything have to be wrapped in such pretentious sentiment? "Good. Then I'll trust you to do better going forward. We'll consider this a learning experience. Have a good evening, Nicole." "Thank you. You too." She ended the call and set the phone down on the desk with more force than necessary. Her hands were shaking slightly, not with fear, but with anger and frustration and a deep, bitter resentment that she couldn't quite articulate. She finished her wine in 3 long swallows and poured herself another glass, larger this time. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. She looked again at the family photograph, at her mother's gentle smile, at her father's strong arms, at her own childish happiness. She reached out and placed her palm over the empty space where her grandmother's image had once been, covering it completely, as if she could erase not just the picture but the memory, the pain, the years of coldness and judgment. "I won't be like you," she whispered to the absent image. "I won't let anyone make me feel small again." She drained the second glass of wine and climbed into bed without bothering to change out of her work clothes. Sleep came quickly, aided by alcohol and exhaustion, but it brought no peace. In her dream, she was 7 years old again, small and helpless, standing in the grand foyer of her grandmother's house. The space was vast and cold, all marble floors and dark wood paneling, with a crystal chandelier that cast sharp shadows across everything. Young Nicole stood near the door, her small hand clutching her grandmother's skirt, watching as her mother approached up the front steps. Her mother looked tired in the dream, her face drawn with grief and stress, her clothes slightly rumpled. She carried a pink bakery box tied with white string, the kind of box that La Maison Dorée still used. Nicole realized with dream logic that made no sense but felt entirely true. Inside would be pastries, treats, small offerings of love that her mother had scraped together money to buy, hoping to bring some sweetness to her daughter's life. Nicole's grandmother stood in the doorway like a guardian at the gates, her posture rigid, her face carved from stone. When Nicole's mother reached the top step, she held out the bakery box with trembling hands. "I brought Nicole's favorites," her mother said, her voice soft and pleading. "Chocolate croissants. Could I come in for a moment? Just to see her? Just to make sure she's okay?" "We had an agreement," Nicole's grandmother said, her voice cold and sharp as winter wind. "1 supervised visit per month. You've already had yours this month. You can't simply appear whenever you feel like it." "Please," her mother whispered, and young Nicole felt her heart breaking at the desperation in that single word. "She's my daughter. I just want to see that she's happy. She's perfectly fine. She doesn't need you disrupting her routine with your emotional displays." Nicole's grandmother began to close the door. "Mama!" young Nicole cried out, trying to run forward, but her grandmother's hand clamped down on her shoulder with surprising strength, holding her in place. Her mother's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked past Nicole's grandmother to where her daughter struggled and reached. "Baby, I love you. I love you so much. Don't forget that, okay? Don't ever forget." "That's enough," Nicole's grandmother said firmly. "You're upsetting the child. Leave now, or I'll call the police and report you for violating the custody agreement." The door swung shut, cutting off the sight of her mother standing on the steps with her bakery box of rejected offerings, tears streaming down her face. Young Nicole collapsed to the floor, sobbing, while her grandmother stood over her with disapproving silence, waiting for the emotional storm to pass before resuming the day's rigid schedule. Nicole woke with tears on her face and her heart pounding. The dream had felt so real, so vivid, that for a moment she couldn't remember where she was or what year it was. She lay in the darkness of her apartment, listening to the distant sounds of the city, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She hadn't dreamed about her mother in months. Usually she kept those memories locked away, buried deep where they couldn't hurt her. But the day's events had stirred something loose, had opened doors she preferred to keep closed. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her back into sleep, though this time it was dreamless and dark. Morning came too soon, announced by the harsh buzz of her alarm. Nicole dragged herself from bed, her head aching from wine and troubled sleep, her mouth dry and bitter. She showered mechanically, dressed in her work uniform, black pants, white shirt, the burgundy apron with La Maison Dorée embroidered in gold thread, and walked to the bakery through streets still quiet with early morning. The bakery was just opening when she arrived. Norman was already there, setting up the display cases with fresh pastries that gleamed like jewels under the warm lights. He looked up as she entered and gave her a cautious smile. "Hey, you okay? You look tired." "I'm fine," Nicole said shortly. She didn't want to talk about the phone call, didn't want to acknowledge the conversation or the apology she had given. She just wanted to get through the day, to prove through her work that she was valuable and competent, to show that she didn't need lectures about kindness from customers or owners. The morning rush began as it always did, with a trickle of early customers that gradually swelled into a steady stream. Nicole fell into her familiar rhythm, taking orders, processing payments, calling to the kitchen. She was efficient, professional, impeccable in her service. No one could fault her performance. And then, about an hour into the rush, she saw him. The man from yesterday, the one who had complained, the one who had threatened to call the owner, stood at the back of the line, waiting his turn. Nicole felt her stomach drop. What was he doing here? Had he come back to check on her, to see if she had been disciplined, to gloat over whatever consequences he had caused? As the line moved forward, she watched him with growing unease. He seemed to be squinting at the menu board, his head tilted back, his eyes narrowed. When he finally reached the counter, he stood there for a long moment, saying nothing, just studying the menu with apparent difficulty. Nicole felt her impatience rising like a tide. Was he seriously going to do this again? Was he deliberately trying to provoke her, to test her, to see if she would repeat yesterday's behavior? "Sir," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled irritation, "do you need help deciding? The line is quite long this morning." Wayne, though she still didn't know his identity, continued to squint at the board. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "My eyesight isn't very clear. Could you read me the—" "Are you kidding me right now?" Nicole interrupted, her voice rising. "Your eyes worked perfectly fine yesterday when you were standing in line watching everyone. Don't pretend you can't see just to make some kind of point." Wayne turned to look at her directly, and something in his expression made her falter. There was no anger there, no triumph, no provocation. Instead, there was sadness and disappointment, and a kind of weary resignation, as if he had hoped for better and been proven wrong. "Nicole," he said quietly, "I'm not pretending anything. And I'm not just a customer. I'm Wayne Bridge, the owner of this bakery. We spoke on the phone last night." The words hit Nicole like a physical blow. The color drained from her face as understanding crashed over her. The complaining customer hadn't called the owner, he was the owner. He had witnessed her behavior directly, had tested her sincerity, and she had failed spectacularly. I didn't," she stammered, but no coherent words would come. "I came in yesterday to see my bakery through a customer's eyes," Wayne continued, his voice still quiet but carrying clearly in the suddenly silent shop. Every customer, every employee, was watching now. I wanted to understand what kind of atmosphere we were creating, what kind of experience people had when they walked through our doors. And what I saw was an employee who treated an elderly customer with impatience and disrespect, who valued efficiency over kindness, and who responded to criticism with defensiveness and arrogance. Nicole felt as if the floor was tilting beneath her feet. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, to make him understand the pressures and the difficulties and the impossible balance of serving everyone well, but the words wouldn't come. "I gave you a chance last night," Wayne said. "I called you, explained my concerns, and hoped to hear genuine remorse. Instead, I heard a perfunctory apology from someone who didn't believe she had done anything wrong. And this morning, when I tested whether you had actually learned anything, you proved that you hadn't. You were just as impatient, just as dismissive, just as unwilling to extend basic courtesy to someone who needed a little extra time." "Please," Nicole whispered. "I need this job. I can do better. I will do better." Wayne shook his head slowly. "I believe you think that, but I don't believe you understand what better actually means. This bakery was built on a simple philosophy. Sweetness soothes the soul. We're here to bring comfort and joy to people's lives, even in small ways. Someone who doesn't understand that, who sees customers as obstacles rather than human beings deserving of respect, can't truly serve that mission." He paused, and Nicole could see in his face that what came next caused him genuine pain. "I'm sorry, Nicole. I'm going to have to let you go." Please collect your things and leave your apron and name tag at the office. Nicole stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. Fired. She was being fired. After 2 years of reliable service, of never calling in sick, of handling the rush with perfect efficiency, she was being dismissed because she hadn't been sufficiently warm to difficult customers. "You can't," she said, her voice breaking. "You need me. We're short-staffed. I'm one of your best employees." "You're one of our most efficient employees," Wayne corrected gently. "But efficiency without kindness is just coldness in disguise. I'd rather be short-staffed than have someone who makes our customers feel unwelcome." Norman stepped forward, his face stricken. "Mr. Bridge, maybe." "Norman, please take over the register," Wayne said firmly. "Nicole, I need you to leave now." Moving as if in a dream, Nicole untied her apron with numb fingers. She walked to the back office, collected her bag and jacket, left the burgundy apron folded neatly on the desk with her name tag placed carefully on top. When she emerged, she walked toward the door without looking at anyone. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall in front of all these watching eyes. But at the door, she paused. She turned and looked back at the bakery, at the warm lights and the golden pastries and the customers chatting softly over coffee. And there, above the counter, she saw the sign she had walked past 1,000 times without really reading it. "Sweetness soothes the soul." The words seemed to mock her now, to highlight everything she had failed to understand, everything she had valued wrongly. She turned away and stepped out into the cool morning air, letting the door swing shut behind her with a gentle chime. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Nicole walked the city streets aimlessly, her phone clutched in her hand but no one to call, nowhere to go. She stopped at a liquor store as afternoon faded to evening and bought a bottle of cheap vodka. By the time the sun set, she was sitting on a bench in Riverside Park, taking long swigs from the bottle and watching the world blur into softer, easier shapes. The park was beautiful in the gathering dusk. Autumn leaves covered the ground in a carpet of gold and crimson, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. A few people walked past joggers finishing their evening runs, couples strolling hand in hand, elderly people walking small dogs on leashes. Nicole watched them all with hollow eyes, feeling utterly disconnected from their simple pleasures, their easy contentment. She thought about her apartment, about the rent she couldn't pay, about the job applications she would have to fill out, about the gap in her resume she would have to explain. She thought about her mother, who had struggled so hard and lost so much, who had died alone and heartbroken. She thought about her grandmother, cold and unforgiving, who had taught her that elderly people were cruel and judgmental and impossible to please. The vodka bottle was nearly empty when she noticed a man approaching. He was perhaps 40, wearing dirty jeans and a stained jacket, his eyes scanning the park with predatory interest. He saw her sitting alone, saw the bottle in her hand, saw the way she swayed slightly even while sitting, and his face lit up with opportunistic intent. "Hey there, pretty lady," he said, his voice oily and false. "You look like you could use some company." Nicole's head was spinning, her thoughts moving slowly through the fog of alcohol. "Go away," she mumbled. "Not interested." "Aw, don't be like that." He sat down beside her on the bench, close enough that she could smell the sour odor of unwashed clothes and stale beer. "I'm just being friendly. No need to be rude. I said go away." Nicole tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't quite support her weight. She stumbled, caught herself against the bench, and the man's hand shot out to grab her arm. "Whoa, careful there. You're pretty drunk. Why don't you let me help you home? I'll make sure you get there safe." Nicole jerked her arm away, but her coordination was compromised, her reactions slow. "Don't touch me." "Hey, I'm just trying to help." But his grip tightened, and there was nothing helpful in his eyes, only calculation and hunger. "Help! Someone help me!" Nicole's scream rang out across the park, high and desperate. The man's expression darkened. "Shut up! Stop making a scene. Let her go immediately." The voice was female, elderly, quavering with age but sharp with authority. Both Nicole and the man turned to see Mrs. May hurrying toward them as fast as her elderly legs would carry her. She was perhaps 50 feet away, moving with surprising determination, her cream-colored handbag swinging from her arm. "This doesn't concern you, old woman," the man snarled. "Mind your own business." "That young woman is my business," Mrs. May called back. "I said let her go." The man laughed, a cruel sound. "What are you going to do about it, Grandma?" But he had underestimated Mrs. May. She reached them and, without hesitation, swung her handbag with all her strength. The bag, apparently much heavier than it looked, connected with the side of the man's head with a satisfying thunk. He yelped and released Nicole's arm, stumbling backward. "I have my phone right here," Mrs. May said, fumbling in her purse with one hand while holding it ready to swing again with the other. "I'm calling the police right now. You have 3 seconds to leave before I give them your description and tell them you were attempting to assault this young woman." The man looked between Mrs. May and Nicole, calculating his options. Whatever he saw in Mrs. May's face, a determination that belied her gentle appearance, convinced him the situation wasn't worth the risk. He backed away, hands raised, then turned and jogged off into the darkening park. Mrs. May immediately turned to Nicole, who had collapsed back onto the bench, shaking. "Are you hurt, dear? Did he harm you?" "No, I'm okay." But Nicole's voice broke on the last word, and suddenly she was crying great, shuddering sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside her. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Mrs. May sat down beside her and wrapped a gentle arm around her shoulders. "Hush now. It's all right. You're safe. Just breathe." They sat together as Nicole's sobs gradually subsided into hiccuping gasps. The park grew darker around them, and Mrs. May produced a package of tissues from her magical handbag and pressed them into Nicole's hands. "Thank you," Nicole managed finally. "You saved me. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." "I'm just glad I was taking my evening walk," Mrs. May said gently. "What's a young woman like you doing in the park alone at this hour, drinking herself into such a state?" And somehow, perhaps because of the alcohol, perhaps because of the fear, perhaps because she had nothing left to lose, Nicole found herself telling Mrs. May everything about being fired that morning, about the incident at the bakery, about her impatience with elderly customers and her defensiveness when confronted, about her grandmother and her mother and the years of pain that had taught her to see elderly people as enemies rather than human beings deserving of respect. Mrs. May listened without interruption, her face growing sadder as the story unfolded. When Nicole finally fell silent, exhausted by confession, Mrs. May reached into her handbag once more and pulled out a small white box tied with string, a box from La Maison Dorée. "Here," she said, opening the box to reveal a chocolate macaron nestled in tissue paper. "Eat this." Nicole stared at the delicate pastry. Was this what you were trying to order before I interrupted you?" Mrs. May smiled, her eyes crinkling with gentle humor. "Yes, dear. I was trying to ask if you had chocolate macarons. I have poor eyesight, you see, and I couldn't read the menu clearly. I was about to specify macarons when you assumed I wanted a crepe." Nicole took the macaron with trembling fingers, shame flooding through her. "I'm so sorry. I was so rude to you. I didn't listen. I didn't care. I just wanted to move the line along, and I made you feel stupid and worthless, and I'm so sorry." "I forgive you," Mrs. May said simply. "We all make mistakes, dear. We all have pain that makes us lash out sometimes. The question is what we do after we've made the mistake, whether we learn and grow, or whether we harden our hearts and blame others." Nicole bit into the macaron, and the taste exploded on her tongue, rich, sweet chocolate with a hint of salt, the perfect balance of crisp shell and soft filling. It was delicious, but more than that, it was a gesture of kindness from someone she had wronged, an offering of grace she didn't deserve. "Your boss, Mr. Bridge, he's a good man," Mrs. May said. "Very principled, very dedicated to treating people with respect. If you go to him tomorrow morning and apologize, sincerely, truly sincerely, from your heart, I think he might give you another chance." "Why would he?" Nicole asked bitterly. "I've proven I don't understand what he values. I don't know how to be the kind of employee he wants." "Then learn," Mrs. May said firmly. "You're young. You have time to grow and change. But you have to be willing to do the work, to really examine your heart and your attitudes, to understand where your anger comes from, and choose to let it go." She stood slowly, her joints creaking, and held out her hand to Nicole. "Come on, let's get you home. You need to sleep this off, and tomorrow you need to be clear-headed when you face Mr. Bridge." Nicole let Mrs. May help her to her feet and walk her the 6 blocks to her apartment building. At the door, she turned to the elderly woman, this stranger who had saved her and counseled her and shown her more kindness than she deserved. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked. "After how I treated you." Mrs. May smiled and patted her cheek gently. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, dear. And because I see in you the same pain I once carried, the fear of being judged, the defensiveness that comes from old wounds. It takes courage to let that go. But I believe you have that courage, if you choose to use it." She pressed a slip of paper into Nicole's hand, her phone number, written in shaky script. "Call me tomorrow after you've spoken with Mr. Bridge. I'd like to know how it goes." Then she turned and walked slowly down the sidewalk, her figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. Nicole stood watching until she was gone, then looked down at the half-eaten macaron still clutched in her hand, a symbol of sweetness offered freely, of grace given without condition, of the possibility that people could be kind even when you didn't deserve it. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, her head still spinning but her heart somehow lighter than it had been in hours. Tomorrow she would face Wayne Bridge and try to find words adequate to express the change beginning to take shape inside her. Tonight, she would sleep and dream of her mother's gentle smile and hope that somewhere, somehow, she was learning to forgive both others and herself. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through Nicole's curtains, and she woke with a pounding headache and a mouth that tasted like regret. For a moment, she lay still, trying to piece together the events of the previous evening, the vodka, the park, the man who had grabbed her, Mrs. May's surprising rescue. It all felt dreamlike and surreal, but the slip of paper on her nightstand with Mrs. May's phone number proved it had been real. She dragged herself to the shower and stood under the hot water for a long time, letting it wash away the physical remnants of yesterday's disasters. But the emotional weight remained the shame of how she had treated Mrs. May, the humiliation of being fired, the bitter recognition that her grandmother's cruelty had poisoned her more deeply than she had realized. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel with her dark hair dripping, she found her phone buzzing. A text message from an unknown number. "Good morning, dear. This is Mrs. May. I'll meet you outside La Maison Dorée at 9 a.m. Don't be late. Wear something neat. And remember, speak from your heart, not your pride." Nicole stared at the message, torn between gratitude and confusion. Why was Mrs. May helping her? What did she hope to accomplish by accompanying her to face Wayne? Surely he had made his decision, and no amount of apologizing would change his mind. But something in Mrs. May's quiet confidence made Nicole want to try. She dressed carefully in a simple blue dress and cardigan, applied minimal makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes, and arrived at the bakery at 8:55, her stomach churning with anxiety. Mrs. May was already there, standing beneath the cream-colored awning in a lavender dress and matching jacket, her silver hair styled neatly, her handbag, the same one that had served as a weapon the night before, hanging primly from her arm. She smiled when she saw Nicole approach. "There you are. You look lovely, dear. Are you ready?" "I don't know," Nicole admitted. "What if he won't listen? What if he's already hired someone else? Then at least you'll know you tried. Mrs. May said firmly. "But I have a feeling Mr. Bridge is a man who values genuine remorse. Come along now. The morning rush hasn't started yet, it's the perfect time." They entered the bakery together, the little bell above the door chiming softly. The space was quiet, with only 2 customers sitting at corner tables with their coffee and pastries. Norman was behind the counter, and his eyes widened when he saw Nicole enter with Mrs. May. "Nicole, what are you?" "Is Mr. Bridge here?" Nicole asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need to speak with him." Norman hesitated, then nodded. "He's in the office. I'll get him." He disappeared through the back door, and Nicole and Mrs. May stood waiting in the warm, butter-scented air. Nicole's hands were trembling, so she clasped them together tightly. Beside her, Mrs. May reached over and gave her arm a gentle, encouraging squeeze. When Wayne emerged from the back, his expression was carefully neutral. He wore the same burgundy sweater from the day before, and his eyes moved from Nicole to Mrs. May with evident surprise. "Mrs. May," he said politely. "Nicole, this is unexpected." "Mr. Bridge," Mrs. May said, her voice carrying surprising authority despite its gentle tone. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I've brought Nicole here this morning because she has something important to say to you. I'd be grateful if you'd give her a few moments of your time." Wayne studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. "Of course. Please, let's sit over here." He gestured to a table near the window, away from the other customers. They settled into chairs, and Nicole found herself sitting across from Wayne with Mrs. May beside her like a guardian angel. Wayne folded his hands on the table and waited, his expression patient but reserved. Nicole took a deep breath. All night, she had tried to compose perfect words, eloquent explanations that would make him understand. But now, facing him in the gentle morning light with Mrs. May's words echoing in her mind, "Speak from your heart, not your pride," she abandoned all the careful speeches and simply told the truth. "Mr. Bridge, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for how I treated Mrs. May, and for how I spoke to you, and for not understanding what you were trying to teach me." Her voice wavered, but she pushed on. "You were right about everything. I was rude and impatient, and I made Mrs. May feel like a burden when she deserved kindness and respect. And when you gave me a chance to apologize sincerely, I didn't. I just said what I thought you wanted to hear without actually meaning it." She glanced at Mrs. May, drawing courage from the elderly woman's encouraging nod. "Last night, Mrs. May saved me from someone who wanted to hurt me. And afterward, instead of being angry about how I'd treated her, she was kind to me. She shared her food with me and listened to my story and helped me understand why I've been so angry at elderly people for so long." Nicole's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from Wayne's steady gaze. "My grandmother was cruel to me and my mother. She kept us apart until my mother died of a broken heart, and I let that poison me. I let it make me see all elderly people as enemies, as people who would judge me and control me and make me feel small. But that's not fair, and it's not right, and it's not who I want to be." She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "I don't expect you to give me my job back. I understand if you can't trust me anymore. But I needed you to know that I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. Sweetness soothes the soul. It's not just a motto. It's a way of treating people, of making them feel valued and welcome, of offering kindness even when it's inconvenient. And I failed at that. But I want to learn. I want to be better." The silence that followed felt endless. Wayne's expression had softened as she spoke, but Nicole couldn't read whether it meant forgiveness or simply pity. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentle. "Thank you for that apology, Nicole. I can hear that you mean it this time." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Customer service isn't really about efficiency or speed, though those things matter. It's about seeing the humanity in every person who walks through that door. It's about understanding that a few extra seconds of patience might be exactly what someone needs. Maybe they're lonely, maybe they're grieving, maybe they just need to feel like they matter to someone. even if it's just the person taking their order. He glanced at Mrs. May with a small smile. Mrs. May is one of our regular customers, and she always brightens the bakery with her presence. When I saw her treated with impatience and disrespect, it broke my heart not just for her, but for all the other vulnerable people who might be made to feel unwelcome in a place that should offer them comfort. Mrs. May reached over and placed her hand on Nicole's. "Mr. Bridge, I want to vouch for this young woman. She made a mistake, but she's learned from it, and I promise you, as her grandmother, that she will never repeat such behavior." Both Nicole and Wayne turned to stare at Mrs. May. "Grandmother?" Wayne asked, his eyebrows raised. Mrs. May smiled, her eyes twinkling with warmth and determination. "Yes, from now on, I'll be her new grandmother. She lost hers to bitterness and cruelty, and I lost my own granddaughter to distance when she moved overseas. It seems to me we could both use each other, and I assure you, I take my responsibilities seriously. I'll make certain she honors the values you hold dear in this establishment." Nicole felt something crack open in her chest, some long frozen place that suddenly flooded with warmth. Tears spilled down her cheeks freely now, tears of gratitude and relief and a hope she hadn't felt in years. "You would do that?" she whispered. "You would really?" "Of course, dear," Mrs. May said, squeezing her hand. "Everyone deserves a grandmother who loves them, and everyone deserves a second chance." Wayne sat back in his chair, and for the first time since they'd entered, he smiled a genuine smile that reached his eyes and transformed his face. "Well, I can't argue with that kind of endorsement." He looked at Nicole with an expression that was both stern and kind. "I'll give you another chance, Nicole, but understand that this is your last one. If you fall back into old patterns, if you treat customers with anything less than respect and patience, there won't be a third chance. Can you accept that?" "Yes," Nicole said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I promise. I'll be better. I'll make you proud. I'll make Mrs. May proud. I'll honor what this place stands for." "Then welcome back," Wayne said. He stood and extended his hand. Nicole rose and shook it, feeling the warmth and firmness of his grip, the unspoken promise of trust being cautiously rebuilt. Mrs. May stood as well, beaming with satisfaction. "Wonderful. Now, since we're all here and on good terms, I believe I'd like to finally order those chocolate macarons I've been trying to get for 2 days." They all laughed, real laughter, warm and healing. Nicole wiped her tears and smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in days. "I'll get them for you personally, Mrs. May. Grandma. On the house." "Nonsense, Mrs. May said. "I'll pay properly. But I'll take an extra one for you, dear. We'll share them on a park bench after your shift and talk about better things than old wounds and missed chances." As the morning light grew stronger through the bakery windows, Nicole felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the tight, angry knot that had lived in her chest for so long. She looked at the sign above the counter, at those words she had finally learned to understand. Sweetness soothes the soul. It wasn't just about pastries or customer service. It was about grace freely given, about forgiveness offered even when undeserved, about the possibility that people could choose kindness over bitterness, connection over isolation, love over old wounds. She had lost her mother and been abandoned by her grandmother. But today, in this small bakery filled with the scent of butter and chocolate, she had found something she thought she'd never have again, a family built not on blood but on choice, on compassion, on the simple human need to care for one another. Mrs. May squeezed her hand once more, and Nicole squeezed back, holding on to this new beginning with both gratitude and determination. Whatever came next, she would face it differently. She would honor her mother's gentle spirit and reject her grandmother's cruelty. She would learn to see people, all people, regardless of age or circumstance, with the kindness they deserved. The morning rush would begin soon, and Nicole would put on her burgundy apron and return to work. But this time, she would bring something new to the counter, not just efficiency, but warmth. Not just competence, but compassion. Not just service, but sweetness that truly soothed the soul.